Greetings, everyone, and greetings to all the participants of this important Eastern and Southern Africa Youth Employment Knowledge Sharing Forum. Um, Hopalong asked me to deliver on behalf of the Youth Employment Program here in Geneva and with our specialists across the globe, a brief presentation about some of the findings of our impact evaluations in Eastern Africa. My name is Drew Gardner. I'm an evaluation specialist, and I backstop the Youth Entrepreneurship Facility project, which I'm sure you have been hearing a lot about in the past couple of days on the topic of impact evaluation. I was very happy to see that one of the main topics and the keynote address of your knowledge sharing forum was a discussion about how to bring research to policy and research to action, and how to create evidence-based solutions on youth employment. And I wanted to share with you some findings from an impact evaluation in Kenya. This study is one of a series of evaluations that the ILO is leading and participating in, and it's based on a renewed commitment from our governing body and from our social partners, many of which are here with us today, to what works in youth employment and to creating evidence-based recommendations and evidence-based findings on what works in youth employment. And one of the ways that we do that and that we advocate for is to understand what works through impact evaluations. Now, one of the topics of focus of the Youth Employment Program and of many technical cooperation activities, especially the Youth Entrepreneurship Facility for East Africa, has been on impact evaluation and entrepreneurship especially. And what I'll talk about today, the title of this presentation is Business Training to Boost Women's Entrepreneurship and Women's Empowerment. So we set out in this evaluation to understand what works with ILO's Get Ahead training program. Get Ahead is an entrepreneurship training program targeted at women and women business owners. It's a gender-based business training focused on experiential learning, agency empowerment, and control of resources. It's a massive undertaking of the ILO to teach women entrepreneurship skills. Over in 35 countries and over 30,000 women have graduated from the Get Ahead program. It's a 5-day, 40-hour course, so we're talking about quite a short training in the grand scheme of things. And this particular training, which we offered in Kenya as part of the Youth Entrepreneurship Facility and the Women's Entrepreneurship Development WED, was offered to the women for free. But the women did receive $6 a day transport subsidy. This evaluation study that we set upon, we wanted to understand a few different questions, and we spell this out in the theory of change for this particular evaluation. There's 4 main topics which we wanted to understand better as part of this evaluation. First one, or a few main assumptions, I should say, that we wanted to understand. We were assuming that women did not have sufficient business knowledge and skills to grow their businesses. We're assuming that women businesses, they exist. There's many of them, and I think this is the main problem with many developing countries, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa. There is a lot of businesses, but they fail to grow. And they fail to grow to a size where they can also employ others. And employment indicators of this study are obviously something of great importance to the ILO. We're also assumed that women lack empowerment, so they do not have sufficient control over their own resources, and that women lack access to markets, networks, and supply chains vis-a-vis a man who might have better markets and better networks to business development resources. So this evaluation, as I mentioned, took place in Kenya, and it took place in 4 main towns or villages. most of which were in western Kenya, close to the border with Uganda. And the four main villages you see there indicated on this map were Kakamega and Kisii in western Kenya, and Embu and Kitu in eastern Kenya. We also chose, within these four villages, we chose to work in 157 different markets. So these are the very typical markets that you'll find in any community, in any village setting, in more rural communities where women were selling their products and women were setting up their small businesses. These are very much micro businesses. So as I mentioned, this impact evaluation that we set upon had a unique design, and a design that used a methodology called an RCT, a randomized control trial. This is considered by many, although there's a lot of debate, as a gold standard methodology for an evaluation. And although an impact evaluation is not something that is very common, it can be an advantage to use an RCT design in some very specific cases. The key behind a randomized control trial obviously is randomizing the selection of participants that will participate in your survey. So randomizing participation, why do we do it? We do it to minimize selection bias. So we do it to, we minimize the selection of or preferential treatment of certain survey participants. And we do it so that we're able to compare two similar groups. So a group, what we call a treatment group, which receives an intervention, in this case women's entrepreneurship training, and a control group, which does not receive the training. So we need to be able to compare accurately these two different groups, and those two different groups, in order to be comparable, need to be the same. The only way to guarantee that these two groups are the same is by randomizing the placement of those women into the treatment group or the control group. So this research was set up in a very similar design. The full sample of the women that were participated in the evaluation is 358 women, entrepreneurs in 157 markets. So I talk about women as individuals, and I talk about markets as two units of measurement. And in this particular evaluation, that randomization selection of participants was done at both the individual level, so the women entrepreneurs, and at the market level. So that's what we're indicating here, which I'll point to with my marker. The treatment group was 1,173 women in 93 treatment markets. We also had, in the second group here, 998 women in 93 markets. So this is women which were located in the same markets as a treatment group, but were selected at random. So you had treatment and control women in the treatment group, and then the pure control. And these are women which were not located in the markets that were selected for the treatment, but were outside of those markets and were also participating in answering the survey questions. So this was the important thing about this slide is to understand that randomization can be done at both the individual level and what we call the catchment area, or what we call a control area as well. So that's done at the level of a village or the level of a school or other different levels. This just demonstrates what I was just talking about. So randomization at the market level, as I indicated before, 157 markets, which you see indicated here on this slide. And these markets were selected at random, and the stars indicate the villages or the markets that were selected for the treatment group. So those that were participating in the women's entrepreneurship training. Same thing at the individual level. So this indicates the 3,300 full sample of individuals, women that participated in the sample. And this next slide Also, randomized selection at individual level. Treatment is the pink, and control is the blue. So, a brief summary of the timeline of this evaluation. On the top, in the red here, this is the actual interventions. There were several interventions. And at the bottom here, this indicates the different data collection stages which took place and which will take place as part of the study. So you can see this is quite an involved, quite an elaborate study. The key thing about this slide is to understand that in addition to doing the get-ahead training, so as I talked about before, the 40 hours, 5 days of training, the women who participated in the treatment group, they also received networking sessions. So these were when women came together to discuss with each other their businesses and to improve some of the networking and association between women. And they also received mentoring sessions, which you see here. So this is when we linked women up to more successful women entrepreneurs, and they exchanged lessons and messages about how to be good business women. And this is something which is ongoing right now. And on the bottom, as you see here in the data collection phase, several different rounds. So we did a baseline survey in 2013. We've done 2 qualitative surveys, you see here, and we've done a midline survey. And the midline survey, the results of the midline survey is what I want to share with you today. And then what hasn't taken place yet, which will happen later this year or early next year, is the endline survey. So we'll have two different times where we'll have results from this survey, one which is a bit shorter term and one in the endline survey which is a bit longer term. This is what's called a balance chart. So the point of this chart was just to show you that the groups which we selected, so both the treatment and the control group, as I mentioned before, have to be the same and are the same in this evaluation. And you can do that by comparing a few of the different characteristics of our women in this sample. So you can see that women were on average about 36 years of age. They had on average 9 years of education, you can see here. 2/3 of them were married, so a lot of them were married. 5 people in the household. So this is showing us that the average characteristics of women in our sample, and that the sample of individuals at both the village level and at the individual level are the same, and thus we are able to compare them. And we get this data from our baseline survey, the baseline survey which was implemented in advance of the training starting. So yeah, again here, a quick rundown of profile of the women entrepreneurs. Another interesting thing here to know is 25% of the women had already taken loans from MFIs. 35% of them already were keeping business records at the time that the baseline survey was done. So our results. So the first and very positive result that we found at the midline survey. So this midline was done a year after the women graduated from the Get Ahead training. So we're able to measure impact from the training, a year afterwards. So in total, 900 women entrepreneurs were training. That's a take-up rate of 80%, which is quite good for training. Oftentimes, the take-up of trainings is quite low, and which already can tell you a lot about the quality of a training intervention. But here, 80%, 95% of those who attended the first day attended all 5 days. And there was a higher attendance for those with a higher education and closer to venue. Obviously, the closer you are to a training venue, the more likely you are to participate. And the costs of the training were 22,000 Kenyan shilling per women trained. So the first kind of category of indicators which we want to talk about here was the impact on business knowledge and business practices. So there was quite good impact on business knowledge and business practices, which we like to see. 10% increase in the use of business practices, equally effective for women with low and high initial business skills. So this was across the board, not only with those that started with a higher level of skills, but also with lower level. And small spillover effects. So spillover meaning for those that didn't participate in the training, did they share these messages with friends? Did they share these messages with colleagues? So no spillover effects. No impact on business knowledge requiring calculations. So accounting is an issue here, and the training did not seem to help out with basic calculations. No impact on business survival. So this isn't to say that there's a negative, positive impact on business survival. This is just to say that this program did not show any evidence of increasing business survival. Although 11% of the firms which were surveyed did close down over the period. The next category, and probably the most interesting one, obviously, for us is impact on business performance. So there was an increase in weekly sales and profits of between 7 to 18%, which is significant and which is quite large, equivalent of 113 to 210 Kenyan shillings per week. But, and that's a big but, there was a large increase in sales, in sales and profits. But to put this into relative terms, the businesses would need 2 to 6 years of these increases in sales to exceed costs. So when you look at this increase in relative terms, it's actually not a great increase in impact, because it's going to take a lot of time. For the costs of running these businesses are quite high compared to the increase in profits. Positive effect on the ratio of business profits in the worst week of the year to the current week. So there's a modest increase in marketing and customer relations, and no significant impacts on access to finance. So they didn't access more loans. Owner labor supply self-efficacy. So there was no impacts on the labor supply. They weren't hiring more people, and no significant impacts on self-efficacy, which is a key indicator for empowerment. Modest positive impacts on well-being and mental health. Increase in merry-go-round membership. For those of you that don't know merry-go-round, these are small, informal savings associations that women set up, which there was a slight increase of 3 percentage points, which is great. No significant impacts on attitudes, empowerment, or discussing work with other women. So empowerment was only increased modestly or not at all in this impact evaluation, these midline results. There was 2 qualitative surveys which showed some differences with the quantitative findings. One woman saying, my confidence have changed because those things I lacked, now I have them. So those are our midline surveys. As I said, this is preliminary findings. We'll do another endline survey, second follow-up survey in this study at the end of this year. But there is a lot of challenges with this. So as you saw from the timeline, there was quite a few series of data collection exercises, and there's some survey fatigue among the women entrepreneurs, especially in the control group, understandably, as they're not receiving any of the training. Collecting data was sometimes difficult. Obviously, with seasonality in the rainy season, there was some attrition from the study, which means people were dropping out and we weren't able to follow up with some of the women entrepreneurs. tight timeline, especially in the beginning. So we received a grant with very strict timelines for doing this research, which had to be respected and meant we had to go very fast at certain times. And the research rose expectations for among entrepreneurs. So some thought that they would receive more than just a training and just a mentor session. They wanted to receive actual increased services from the ILO. So I mentioned the way forward implementation of the mentoring intervention, which is going on now. Endline survey end of the year. We'll have a final impact report ready in June 2016, and then start the dissemination of the findings. And that's why we haven't included any recommendations or any policy messages as part of this yet. We want to wait till we have the final results before we do this. But we can leave that up to the participants to discuss, and for you to sit with the findings and see how we can use these findings to influence some of the direction and the discussions that are being held for young women entrepreneurs in Zimbabwe, in the region, and in Africa as a region. Thanks a lot for allowing us to make this presentation about this impact evaluation. Wishing you all the best for a successful forum, knowledge sharing forum, and hello again to the participants, to the social partners, to my youth entrepreneurship facility colleagues which are there, and hoping to make a trip soon to the region. Thank you very much.